In this video, I will talk about the pyramidal pathway, also known as the corticospinal tract. This is the pathway that goes from the motor cortex to the lower motor neurons of the spinal cord, which project to the skeletal muscles and stimulates voluntary movement of the body. Specifically, this pathway originates primarily from pyramidal cells of the primary motor cortex, which is the precentral gyrus and part of the frontal lobe. Some of the cells also lie in the premotor cortex, areas of the primary somatosensory cortex, and the somatosensory association cortex. Similarly to touch stimuli entering the primary somatosensory cortex, the primary motor cortex is also organized according to the region of the body it represents. The axons of the primary neurons travel first through the corona radiata, which contains axons traveling to and from the cortex to the subcortical regions of the brain. Then, the internal capsule, which is a region of white matter lying largely between the thalamus and the lentiform nucleus. The internal capsule, as it moves downward to the midbrain, becomes the cerebral peduncles. Taking a cross-section at this level, they look like this. This is the ventral side, and as we see, the cerebral peduncles lie on the outside of the substantia nigra. The cortical nuclear path is responsible for stimulating voluntary movement of the facial regions and is grouped together with the corticospinal tract, which concerns the limbs and torso, because up until this point, the effector neurons travel together. However, around the midbrain, the axons of the corticonuclear tract start synapsing with the appropriate nuclei containing cell bodies of neurons that will travel to the appropriate facial, head, or neck muscle. For example, muscles controlling eye movement are innervated mostly by the oculomotor nerve, which is the third cranial nerve, and its axons originate from the oculomotor nucleus in the midbrain. Some of the other motor cranial nerve nuclei lie in the pons or even lower in the medulla. The neurons in these nuclei are lower motor neurons because they contain the bodies of the neurons that directly innervate the muscles. Our primary focus, however, is the cortical spinal tract, which will continue from the cerebral peduncles through the pons and into the pyramids. They are clearly visible when looking at the brainstem from the front. It is at this point that the pathway crosses over to the other side. In the pyramidal decussation, 80% of the fibers cross over to create the lateral cortical spinal tract, and the remaining 20% continue moving down in what now becomes the anterior cortical spinal tract of the spinal cord. The anterior tract is responsible for movement of the torso or proximal muscles, and the lateral tract is responsible for the movement of the limbs, or distal muscles. These pathways will synapse with lower motor neurons in the ventral horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord, and their axons will leave through the anterior roots. As we know, action potentials either occur or don't occur, so the strength of a muscle contraction is dependent on how many motor units are stimulated. A motor unit is all of the muscle fibers innervated by one alpha motor neuron. We have very small motor units in areas requiring precise movements, like the hands and eyes, and larger motor units in areas requiring less precision, like the legs or back. A maximal stimulus is one that recruits all of the motor units, so all of the muscle fibers will contract.